Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, we got a very, very special guest, somebody I can't even believe I got on the show, and this is very exciting. But before we get to Ike Baker, we will introduce the other rejects. And with me today, I got Ethan Indigo. What is going on, sir? How are you?
Well, peace. It is an honor to be here and speak with you guys and learn from Mike. This is going to be exciting. I'm really looking forward to this. Ethan Indigo Smith on all the social media, easy to find, frequently writing articles and occasionally even books. So yeah, honored to be here with all of you.
Thank you for making it, sir. I know it's like 8 o'clock for you, so I appreciate it. And my man, Jin the Ninja. What is going on, sir? How are you?
What's up, boss, Mr. 93? I'm going to not fanboy as maybe, well, I probably will. So I'm a big fan of Ike's show and Ike in general. And, I did speak with Greg K yesterday as I sort of subtle bragged pre-recording. And we talked about Ike's book, The Formless Fire, and quote, it is one of the best contemporary esoteric texts of probably the 21st century. So,
holy shit.
So it's big words, and so I'm just I'm a little bit in awe, so I'll try not to be a nerd. But if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter, X at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn. You can follow me on Threshold Saints at Threshold Saints on both X, IG, which is the show, and of course the Grey Lodge, the True Grey Lodge.com, TRVE. GreyLodge.com, and Matt Murrah is of course my co-host in that, as well as the webmaster, and he runs all our socials. So thank you so much, and I'm really excited. So thanks, Nick, for setting this up. I know we've talked about it for over a year, so wow.
Thank you. Not a problem, Jim. And my man Matt, I'm glad you can make it again, sir. Always love having you here, bro. So let everybody know, in case they don't, what your deal is.
Awesome. Super happy to be here as well. And I was checking out Ike's work, and it's really fascinating. Let's have an amazing talk today. So again, Matt Murrah, always at Matt Murrah 19 on all socials. That is Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, maybe some other place I forgot. There's also my website, Kabbalah.com. That's KAABALAH.com. A lot of cool updates there that I did last week. Really excited to coming back to working on it, and also doing readings. So a lot of space to do readings now, which is kind of beta. So if you get it, you're in for a good treat, because afterwards I'll definitely raise the prices, because it takes a lot of work to do all this stuff. But I'll keep everyone that kind of started now in a grandfather state, so always getting the updates. And yeah, there's the spaces as well. We will likely upload some older spaces in YouTube the coming weeks, and that's going to be really cool stuff. Thanks again for calling.
No, of course, and thank you very much for joining us today, sir. And finally, today we are joined by Ike Baker. And no, gematria heads, we are not talking about the Kabbalah of 9 chambers. This is the author of A Formless Fire and Etheric Magic, and the mind behind the podcast Arcanum. Ike's work lives right between the sweet spot between scholarship and practice, with Western esoteric history, initiatory traditions, and the actual mechanics of ritual and theurgy without the bullshit. He's also trained in energy work, modalities like Reiki and Qigong, and his newest work builds a full system for working with the ethereal, with the aether, as a practical experiential technology. Very happy again. Like Jim was saying, we'll try not to fanboy this guy too much. But Ike, I'm very, very happy to have you on the show. And anything that I left out, please just let everybody know about yourself and where they can find all your amazing work.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you having me on, honestly. You guys have had some big guests. You've had some big guests. You've had some great conversations. So I'm really happy to be able to participate. You can find me on IkeBaker.com, IKEBAKER. Anything you want about me is up there. I've got my 3 latest, podcast episodes. I've got the last documentary style presentation from the Arcanum channel, which you can see it in just below in the bottom left or right of my screen. ARCANVM. Was foolish enough to use the Latin type setting, and that's you can find that on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. I like to keep things. I like to keep myself a little available, right? To an extent, within reason, to the public. So for anybody that listens to this conversation we're going to have today and wants to reach out and wants to have a few words, on my website at the bottom right hand corner, there's a little chat widget. And whatever you write in there, please be nice, comes straight to my personal inbox.
Ooh, that'd be rough for me.
It's rough for me.
That's awesome. So I guess if you don't mind, I mean, I hate to just jump right into it, but I guess where did you find yourself at one day walking down this path? Like, was there a moment in history that you still remember, or a thing that happened, or whatever? Like, opened up a book and you're like, "Oh my God, this is it."
Well,
Was it a gradual thing? Like,
Well, it's a story. It's definitely a story, and I've told it a bunch of times. So anybody that's heard it,
sorry,
bear with me. No. It's for your audience, I'd love to tell it because it's kind of interesting. I as a kid, I'd always studied like comparative religions. I was very interested and pulled towards the mysterious, the numinous. I liked being in religious buildings, temples and cathedrals and things like that. For some reason, it scratched an itch that I wasn't fully aware I had. And as I got older, I began to study stuff. But the thing is, I wasn't, I'm originally from Long Island, New York. So it's, it's one of those things where growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, in my neighborhood, what was available to me was like Dan Brown occultism. I didn't realize that I had little esoteric pockets and communities just yet when I was like, 17, 18. So I studied at a very topical level, Kabbalah, Freemasonry, things of this nature, without being involved. And then things take a dramatic turn. I was about 19 years old, and my aunt had a tenant. Very nice lady, very quiet lady, kept to herself. One day she threw herself in front of a train. And my aunt goes down into the apartment, and she sees that this lady was a hoarder. And she's got these books, stacks of books, like in the movies where you got there's like pathways and things, journals still wrapped in the cellophane. So she asked me over, right? I mean, anybody that's interested in the occult, you know how heavy, deceptively heavy a box full of books can be. So she invites me over to help her, clear out the apartment. And I found this one book, and it's still on my Kabbalah shelf over there. And it was called The Oracle of Kabbalah by Richard Seidman. And it's a very thin book. And I know this is weird, right? It's the dead lady's property, but do you mind if I take this? And she said, yeah, sure, of course. So the next day I walk around my neighborhood in Babylon and I read the whole thing because it was very short. Now, when I was done reading it, I wouldn't say that I was necessarily educated to a greater depth or degree than I was before I read it, but something in me struck a chord. It was like, I know this is important. This is the untapped, the unopened drawer, really, to get into this, to really get into this. Like, let's figure this out. So when people use these things, I went on the white pages or the yellow pages on the internet, and I typed in Long Island Kabbalah Study Group. Oh, really? Guy's name and information came up. Reached out to him. He got back to me. He said, that group doesn't meet anymore, but there's this other thing. And the other thing was the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And I didn't really know what magic was. I kind of stumbled into that door, and it wasn't like it was like, oh, this beautiful path immediately. I was actually a no call, no show to my first initiation. I totally flaked out because I was nervous. I didn't really know, what the hell, what am I doing here? These people think they're doing magic, like Harry Potter wand waving shit. Like, this is crazy. But several years later, my life suffered like a total collapse, and something in my gut. So, I mean, my entire body was burning, telling me, you got to go back to these folks. And so I went hat in hand and I said, please, I'm really sorry, but I feel like I have to do this. And they gave me another shot. Now the rest is history. I'm a senior adept of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn under the Cicero lineage, and I
Oh, wow.
am the imperator of the North Carolina temple that we run out of Asheville.
That's wild. The guy moved from Long Island to North Carolina just like me.
Yeah.
Fucking fucked out. When I was talking to him, I was just like, wait, what's going on right now?
Yeah, well, it's one of those states that if you move from a place like Long Island, it's not like, depending on where you go, but
I felt like I just moved to Portion Road.
yeah, exactly. The suburbs down here are not culture shock. They're not, it's not like too crazy. Although my fiance and I were living out in the country for a while, and we had like Amish neighbors. It was wild.
Yeah, my cousin's got that. He's like 30 minutes out of Raleigh. He's got like, his neighbors are like, the real country people. But yeah, over by where I'm at, it almost looks like kind of like 347 or something, like over by Stony Brook. Like it's, still got shit going on. It's just not, ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, all right. Yeah. I think the first book I ever came across, and it did pique my interest. And I think that's what actually kind of made me start like talking to other people in high school that were into magic or witchcraft. It was a fucking Necronomicon, actually. One of my friends had it, and I don't even know where the fuck he got it from, but he had it, and we started reading it. And like one day, he was just like, "Oh, like I think we're in his basement trying to do something out of it." And who the fuck knows what we were doing back then, but that definitely did I guess interest me and make me think it was possible, real stuff like that was real. So kind of like after that, I think I started to become intrigued by other stuff, and eventually I got into the stuff. I guess not too fast, but these books that you have, would you like to like at least I would like to give you a chance to kind of promote them or give people a little bit of an understanding of what some of them are about if you want to.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Sure. I did spend the last 3 years of my life putting them together. So yeah, but yeah, I think it'd be worth it. Yeah, my first book came out 2024, and that was under Tria Prima Press. They're a Masonic imprint out of Phoenix, Arizona. The great Masonic astrologer Jamie Paul Lamb is who was actually a mentor to me.
He's been on here too.
Yeah, Jamie's like that's my guy. If there's no Jamie, there's no Ike. I tell people that all the time.
Wow.
But so they published my first book, and they basically said, hey, would you ever thought about writing a book? And I said, I'm an occultist. Of course I have, but like, what the hell am I going to say in a way that is, how can I contribute in a way that's as eloquent as, somebody else, one of these great authors in our tradition? But after a while, I was like, you know what? I checked in. I did some divination. I did some ritual. And I'm like, this actually might be a really cool opportunity. Let's see what happens. Let me allow myself to be guided. And so I said, what do you want me to write about? And they said, you can write about literally anything. And then I just kind of arrived at this conclusion that if I can write about anything, I'm going to write about everything. And so A Formless Fire is laid out to give the history, theory, and practice of Western esotericism from as far back as we can go in, Sumerian, Mesopotamian cultures up until about, the 1960s with the Aurum Solis and the Wiccan revival and things of this nature. But I really, really dial down into a lot of different histories because I'll be frank, the person that I had in mind reading this was a new Mason. Okay. But the thing is, like, that is a common trope in occultism. This new Mason kind of wanders in, and he's, starry-eyed, and he's got a lot of enthusiasm and very green. Doesn't matter how old you are, but many of us come in and we're just like, oh, this is a new world. And then you eventually go down these roads. You get shoulder tapped to participate in Martinism or one of the appendant bodies or one of the Rosicrucian bodies. And you start discovering, all these names, Ruiz, Kellner, Westcott, Mathers, and all these Masons, all of them were Masons. These people who created, the OTO, the original OTO, Carl Kellner and Theodore Ruiz, the Golden Dawn, the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia. These guys were all Masons. They were very esoteric. So the thing is now all this stuff is seeing a mainstream kind of appearance and somewhat of a support. So now it's like it's not just Masons, but it's like early Masons or Masons early in their career. It's like almost anybody can come to this stuff and be looking around like almost overwhelmed. What is this? How do I get involved? How do I keep my footing sure? And so that's who I wrote the book for. So I give you really a very thorough contextualization of the entirety of the tradition to the best of my ability. So that goes through Platonism, Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and all the way up into the occult revival and things of this nature. I go into Martinism, Elu Cohen, as much as I could fit. I got some pushback from the Barden people. They were like, "Oh, you should have written more about him." And at that point, it turns into a slippery slope. I mean, the book's like almost 500 pages as it is. But yeah, and then at the end, there are, I think, 8 or 9 appendices with practical instructions for everything from preparation of an alchemical or spagyric preparation to the consecration of salt and water, to middle pillar exercise and the lesser ritual of the pentagram with my commentary. So it was quite an intense work. And Jamie edited it, and so did Jake Traer, and we put it out, and it was immediately critically received well. So there's that's still available. And then Etheric Magic, I released with Llewellyn Worldwide. That came out this year in April. And yeah, that also has a kind of a funny story. I was at the Sacred Space Between the World Conference, I think in 2023. Ivo Dominguez had invited me to go up there, like kind of last minute. I had to take off work. I was working as a carpenter at the time. And I drove up to Maryland and didn't really look at the schedule. I just had like 3-4 days to get this whole trip together. I get up there for the morning of the second day, and I look at the schedule. This is the first time I've laid eyes on the schedule, and it's right there, like 8 o'clock in the morning. You get 5 minutes in a room with a Llewellyn editor to pitch them a book. And I was like, yeah, I'll do this. I didn't even know you could do this shit at conferences, but yeah, let's give it a shot. So I get online, and the line is dwindling. You know, I'm getting closer to going in, and I realize, like, oh shit, I don't have a book. I just kind of hopped online in my excitement, and I didn't like think about what I was going to pitch. This is the kind of overconfidence I sometimes can have that my fiance will tell you all about. I'm the guy in the pool, fully clothed, while everybody else is getting their swimming trunks on. I just dive in. But it almost immediately dropped into my head. It's like, listen, dummy, what about the stuff you've been doing for the last 10, 15 years? Right? You've been a practitioner in the system of Western ceremonial magic. And you've also been a practitioner, right, studying and practicing Chinese medicine, body work. They make you take elective. That's how I got into Qigong. I had to take Qigong classes. I went to school up in Syosset at the New York College of Health Professions. And I got my massage therapy degree. I went to school also in Stony Brook very shortly for physical therapy. But really, my love there was truly in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And with that came all the energy work. And I realized at a certain point, these are two things that need each other. You know, they're two sides of one coin. And in the West, we don't have as sophisticated a vernacular and a framework and a system for working with the energy that ultimately empowers your magic. So I was like, yeah, talk to her about that. So I talked for 5 minutes, told her about this book idea. My editor said, sounds good. Send me your introduction and a chapter sample. I was like, okay. And I went to the dining room in the conference hotel. I wrote everything there and sent it to her. And yeah, that book is done. It's done really well. It's being translated into other languages. We're going to do
Very nice.
Yeah, we're gonna do a follow-up too eventually.
That is awesome. Does anybody want to ask anything? Jen, you want to ask anything?
Yes, I do. I've been waiting. Thanks, Nick. You obviously read my mind on the Aether Wave. Ike, this is tangential to what you were saying, but I think it actually fits in perfectly with the theme of books. So on your episode, on his show, recent episode with Greg, as well as with Jamie, who's probably the best Kabbalist I've ever met, probably. And I always thought of myself as quite good, as Matt and Joshua both know, and it was a little bit of a shock, but I humbled myself before him, no problem.
Yo, I didn't even know what to say to the guy. It was kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. Jamie's extremely impressive and comes up often on the show because of his like innovative way he's pretty much redefined the astrogoetic the works that he outlines. I mean, no one else even comes close to what that is. And so that was a big honor to speak with him. So thanks again, Nick. But Ike, you've talked about the importance of Kabbalah as kind of a backdrop of the working reality. And this is something that we talk about in the Grey Lodge with Matt and the branch Joshua all the time. Matt calls it pop Kabbalah. I call it speculative Kabbalah. I know that's not quite the same, but there's an overlap where we both understand each other. And I just want if you have a few words on that, just simply because it's something that, like, we've done a whole Kabbalah series on this show. And Nick and I obviously became friends because of it, sort of. And, so I think it is under appreciated and under sort of articulated way to map Western esotericism, but maybe also map more universal, primordial, maybe, if we want to like be a little Evolian, or because I'm not a perennialist, I'm really more of an axialist, but I just think that that's an interesting kind of framework. Like you can map both things onto the tree, and then you can also understand things through the tree. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it. I'm sorry, I know it's not quite.
I've got a lot of thoughts on that. I just finished teaching a course we did 6 sessions called Hermetic Kabbalah for Practitioners and Initiates. And that was very successful. We went very, very deep. We did a really, really thorough deep dive. Now, the thing is this, you've got different categories of Kabbalah, right? Which is sometimes a reduction and an oversimplification. But look, it works. People get on me they get on my ass about the same thing I say, Eastern tradition, Western tradition. We understand it's part of a whole, but if you want to be a really good mechanic, you can't call everything under the hood car. Like, we need to be able to talk about this stuff and express distinctions so that we can compare and contrast. And so Hermetic Kabbalah is quite different than Hebrew Kabbalah, or ultimately derivative more so from Christian Kabbalah, right? Because this is who really the creators of what we understand as the Hermetic Kabbalah. They were reading Nor von Rosenroth. They were reading Athanasius Kircher. They were reading Johannes Reuchlin. And so they were also reading the Sefer Yetzirah, but very, very small book. And that is much more Hellenistic than some of the other, like, say, the Zohar. So Hermetic Kabbalah is something that is where it has been abstracted, right? People say, oh, Kabbalah is Hebrew mysticism. I don't think that's accurate. I would say the Kabbalah is a system of esoteric exegesis, interpretation. They're taking this framework and rabbis are applying it to their scripture, nowhere else. And they're interpreting their scripture. Now, the Christians come, they get it really through Pico della Mirandola, and they start drilling into Hebrew and Christian scriptures. The Hermetic Kabbalist takes it out of scripture and say, okay, we can apply this to this, to that, to tarot cards, to everything. And so it becomes this great filing cabinet that really eventuates in the system of the Golden Dawn. That codification 777 that Crowley put out was actually a Golden Dawn pamphlet that he took and published. But they had done, many of those initiates had done that work to sort of make these correspondences. And it goes back even to the sort of the French systems of esoteric masonry, like Martinism and the Elu Cohen, and not so much Martinism, but I would say more the Elu Cohen and things of that nature, stuff that has this quasi chivalric Masonic thing. They were toying with the Kabbalah in the 18th century and start coming up with these ideas, but really it reaches its perfection into how we understand it today through the Golden Dawn. And then it seeds, right? Regardy takes it, Dion Fortune takes it, Crowley takes it, Franz Barden takes it. Very similar system to the Golden Dawn. And they proliferate it. And so you've got a lot of the tradition through that swath. And so the key is to bring the pieces back together. But if you can understand the Kabbalah as a system of correspondences through the Golden Dawn, you can understand any kind of Kabbalah, because it's the most, I would say, rigorous, inclusive. At the end of the day, it's a framework.
Yep.
The biggest thing that I tell people is you come to this stuff, and if you're too rigid, because at a certain stage in the Golden Dawn work, right, you drill down, all this rote memorization of what correspondences go where, and then that all gets turned on its head. And everything gets put upside down and over here and over there. It's like, well, that's this left-brained kind of approach to information that modern people have that doesn't work with magic. Everything has to be, you have to prepare for this stuff to permutate, be used here, be used there. It's useful to ingrain that system of correspondences, memorize the tree, work with the tree. But at the end of the day, you got to be willing to give up what you think you know about it, because it's a framework. It's a scaffolding. It's a scaffolding. The Kabbalah itself is not capital T truth. If anything, what you will experience through it is much more of an essentially true nature, particularly in your experience. So that's the whole key. We don't want to over intellectualize. I say this with hundreds of books surrounding me, but you really don't want to over intellectualize magic. You want to have a really, really firm understanding of what you're doing for context and for safety. Yes, safety. But at the end of the day, you can't think your way into a transcendent state. It's just not going to happen. And then the last thing I want to say about the Kabbalah is that you have to understand where it comes from. The Kabbalah, the Hermetic Kabbalah, given as the lineal diagram, the vertical diagram of the tree of life, the 10 Sphirot, the 22 Netivot, the paths. And then you get the three, the veils of negative existence, the 4 or really 5 worlds, and the letters of the Hebrew alphabet with the tarot correspondences. That's it. That's the symbol system right there. But it ultimately comes from a Hellenistic background. All of this stuff actually has more to do with the Greco-Egyptian innovations that carried over this Pythagorean tradition. Right? Gematria. In ancient Greece, this was called isopsephi, right?
Yes.
Right? The Psephi were the little counting stones. They didn't use numerals like we use Arabic numerals, and we've abstracted it. The Greeks were counting with stones and seeing what shapes do these numbers make. That's where you get this concept of triangular numbers, square numbers, oblong numbers. It's because they were arranging pebbles. So isopsephos means equal pebble. So you add up the numerical value of this word, it's got this many pebbles, and this one over here, this word has the same amount of pebbles. They're related. The word gematria comes from the Greek geometria, geometry. So the Kabbalah almost in its entirety is Hellenistic. But here's the issue. We don't have the Hellenistic tradition. We have the philosophy. We don't have the practice. So myself, being a Hellenistic theurgic reconstructionist, the best of my ability, I just got back from a 9-day excursion in Upper and Lower Egypt with a group of about 20 people. I reconstructed theurgic rituals. We were on site. We had private access to the Osirion, to the Sekhmet Sanctuary, to Dendara. I taught astrological magic on the roof of the temple to Hathor at Dendara. So we were doing all this theurgic Hellenistic stuff. It was absolutely incredible. But at the end of the day, the Kabbalah is the better system, practically, because it's full. We have it. It's a living system. It's a living tradition. It's extremely difficult to have a framework that works with the Western modern mind that is as effective and is as beautiful as the Hermetic Kabbalah. So that's why I still use it.
Is that a good answer, Jim?
I think it was a great answer. I only differ with Ike on a small detail, is that I like, maybe this is untrue, maybe it's just a speculative idea. I always posit the origin of the tree, or at least maybe its reintroduction into the kind of Central Asian landscape in the first and second century AD, in the exile period from Babylon. And I think if you look at what the Zoroastrians, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, Ike, but if you look at what the Zoroastrians were doing in this emergence of the philosophy of religion and how they were applying qualities to God, I think it's very similar in some ways to like how Ramek was thinking about Kabbalah much later on, and like where they were sort of congregating. I always talk about this as like Lake Baikal, and you have sort of the Buddhist hermitages, Tantric Buddhist, you have the Kabbalistic hermitages, you have the Tengriist hermitages, all existing in this period of like the 13th to 16th century. And they're all together. And I'm not saying that they were speaking to each other, but obviously, as you're saying, they are speaking a language that is parallel, that can be mapped to the tree, that can be understood as expressions of it, or maybe expressions that then can be discerned and categorized epistemically into the Sephira.
Yeah, and that's why ultimately the tree is the better example, particularly because it's got the paths. Whereas in the Hellenistic version, you have the 10 spheres, but they're nested, right? They become the Ogdoad, or what we call later on the Anima Mundi, or the Ptolemaic model of the universe. So they're nested, whereas the tree of life extracts them into this vertical kind of hierarchy or analogy, and then it's the paths show these relationships. But I would say that, first of all, there's this idea of Hellenic Orientalism, which is very, very apropos. But to drill back to my further point of why I think it had much more to do with the Neo-Pythagorean system, is specifically this. There's a couple of reasons. There are modern words in use in Kabbalistic circles today. Hebrew Kabbalistic, the Hasidim still use Greek words to discuss, like highly, matter. You know, David Chaim Smith, who is my Kabbalah teacher, or one of them, he's expressed this to me. He's like, you will find Greek stuff littered throughout their tradition. They even call him a heretic, which is the word apokoros. Apokoros is a corruption of the Greek word epicurus, like the philosopher, the hedonist, the materialist. They considered him, a heretic in the philosophical tradition. So there's a lot there, but more to the point, when you look at the numerical relationships, particularly the Sphirot, it's the Tetractys. It's the Pythagorean Tetractys. The principles still remain the same. It's just arranged differently. And really you get around the first and second centuries of the Common Era, the population of Alexandria, Egypt, was between 35 and 40% Jewish. So this period is called the period of Hellenized Judaism. Now you get the Septuagint translation of the Hebrew holy books. You get the Merkaba tradition, which was Hebrew theurgy. You get the Hekalot, the palaces, which are organized according to this nested system of cosmology, the same thing. And so you get all of that in this really interesting time. But to bring it back to your point, Pythagoras was from Samos. Okay, Samos is extremely close to Anatolia. He would have been more familiar with the Lydians than he would have with Athenians or people in on mainland Greece. So one of the ways that this is represented is that Pythagoras's philosophy was influenced by this sort of, like, I guess what we're calling the Greater West. Now, we don't want to necessarily break off the quote unquote Middle East. A lot of scholars are saying, well, they contributed to the history of ideas in the West. So it's the Greater West. But either way, one of the ways that they represented the origin for Pythagoras' knowledge is to represent him as wearing pants. Very interesting thing. They say that he wore pants. That's not Greek dress. Greek dress is tunic, himation. They didn't wear pants. It would have looked and seemed ridiculous. And also, some of the more popular depictions of Pythagoras in terms of statuary have him with a turban on as well. So this stuff is all kind of from all over the place, but the evolution is very, very interesting to watch. And I do think, because of some of the things you're saying, these qualities of God and this verbiage that tracks onto the tree, I think that is why the tree is still, or not just the tree, but the Hermetic Kabbalistic system is still the best practical framework for magic.
Thank you so much, Ike. I just want to say that the David Haim Smith book, The Blazing Dew of Stars, is probably my personal favorite Kabbalistic text. So I just want to shout that out.
David will like that.
One thing you did mention before, and I know me and Jin are both big fans of Pico. I think that was actually a very pivotal point too, like what you were mentioning before, because I feel like when he did that, I feel like it just opened up the doors for many different types of people looking at the Kabbalah differently. Christians, Catholics, occultists. Mm-hmm. You know, and I feel like once they did that, like if you for me, it looks like it was on and popping after he brought that stuff in.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to ask from your opinion, and it's something I've kind of had other people talk about slightly here, and we don't have to get too in depth for this, but in your opinion, do you see, well, we'll put it this way, in my opinion, I think that Christianity is actually highly influenced by a lot of Neoplatonists and people that were actually kind of considered occultists in a sense. Would you see that as kind of being possible?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this stuff wasn't occult. It wasn't esoteric until the Enlightenment had its way with us. You know, I mean, there's a tradition, I'd say, in the earliest eras of Christianity, right? When we're calling it Christianities, right? It's a similar idea today. There's many sects and divisions in Christianity, but early on, it was a group of what they call ikos, which, like ecosystem in Greek, that's how you say house. There were house churches, people meeting in houses, little tiny communities. That's who Paul was writing to. And at that stage, right, first, second, third centuries, you get a very, very specific Platonic and Neoplatonic influence in the theology in particular. Let's not forget that the New Testament was written in Greek, which somehow a lot of people still don't know that. But it is very Hellenized in that it utilizes specific Greek philosophical or metaphysical terms like logos, right? In the Johannine prologue, 1 John, in the beginning was the word. The word used there is logos. And logos means so much more than just word. It means order. It means pattern. It means, paradigm, archetype of the system. It's not just saying the word. And this is why God in Genesis, right, especially if you've read the work of this scholar who recently passed, Russell Gmerkin, in Genesis, how does God create? How does God make the order? He speaks it into existence. God doesn't fashion light out of a light bulb. He says, let there be light. So there's this whole thing. It's a very, very Hellenic and Hellenistic sort of tradition. But in the theology, which is not technically, it's derivative from the scriptures, not in the scriptures, you get the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Well, Tertullian, who was an early church father, would have been swimming in these Neoplatonic circles in that time. He introduces this idea of the Holy Trinity, and he says, "Tre personae, una substantia," 3 persons, 1 substance. This idea ultimately comes out of the Platinian Neoplatonic idea of the 3 hypostases, where you have the one that is the 3. Somehow, The one is simultaneously three. God is creative deity, has to simultaneously exist in the beginning in three phases of activity that are coterminous, contemporary. It's all happening at the same time. So yeah, that gets brought in. Then you get the hierarchies that Iamblichus was using, right? The Iamblichian hierarchies for theurgy. The 3rd century Neoplatonic philosopher Iamblichus of Chalkis, who wrote on the mysteries and gives us the whole textbook of Greek theurgy that so much of our ritual is based on, even in the modern day. He comes up with this stratification of a spiritual ontology, like a ladder of being. And he calls these the gods and the greater kinds. And it gets really, really hairy. If you want to know more about it, I did a whole video of it called What is Theurgy on the Arcanum podcast. But long story short, there's this guy that we now call Pseudo-Dionysus. He takes that hierarchy and he changes the nomenclature. Okay, so in the pagan Greek system, they had angels and archangels, but they were lower down. And then above that were these things called the end-cosmic gods, the hyper-cosmic gods, the liberated gods. Well, if you're a Christian, you can't call anything God but God. So he changes the nomenclature, but the way he describes them, the functions remain identical. So yeah, 110%, you get a tremendous amount of esoteric philosophy that completely shapes Christianity. And if you've ever gone to like a Greek or a Catholic mass, this is when they say the thrones, cherubim, seraphim, principalities. When they go down that whole archangels, angels, that's the pseudo-Dionysian hierarchy that got taken out of Greek paganism. So there is a tremendous amount. The thing is, like, don't get your wires crossed and think that they were stealing. That's not what they were doing. If I wanted to swim from I'm on this part, there's water between me, I'm going to that port, and I want to swim, or I want to row my boat. I'm rowing my boat. That's the technology of my, whatever I'm doing, my actions, my work. I'm trying to get there. If my destination changes, do I get out of the water and get a helicopter? No, I'm applying what I'm already doing to a new destination because it's science to them. This was their science. So they didn't steal so much as they reoriented the traditions they had in a new direction. But later on, and this will probably cap my point, later on, you get like Thomas Aquinas, Albertus Magnus, and these guys are the scholastics, and they're much more Aristotelian, but still, obviously, they're theists. So there remains a very strong mystical and metaphysical component there. I would say Christian mysticism is almost entirely informed by the idea of emanation and return that we get from Plotinus.
Yeah, that's why it was another reason why I asked you. I had, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago, even more than that, I did like a solo show on Plotinus. And there was just a lot of stuff in there that I was like, yo, you really influenced the shit out of Christianity. And yes. You know what I had noticed too? And again, I'll just use this as an example. It's probably not the best for everybody because I haven't had the pleasure of going to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. But like if you go there, that's based on the big book, but then you will hear all these phrases that actually aren't in there. It's like, I don't even remember them anymore. But they aren't actually in the big book, but they sound great. I feel like a lot of ideas that a lot of Christians kind of have that technically aren't in the Bible is kind of like influenced by things that Plotinus and other people said. I think even one of them is maybe the idea of seeing your loved ones in the afterlife. It's not in the Bible, but the Christians believe that. And I think that might have actually came from Plotinus in a sense.
Well, it's that goes as far back as Egypt, but the main myth that we have for it in the West comes from the book 10 of the Republic, Plato's Republic, the myth of Ur. So
maybe it was Plato, not Plotinus.
Yeah, but still, Plotinus, he expands the metaphysics of Plato tremendously. But the thing is this, and this is what I tried to establish with A Formless Fire. We cannot underestimate the foundational significance that is still present, not in a vestigial way, but it's here now in our traditions. Our entire way of looking at this stuff, whether you're a Christian or whether you're a ceremonial magic, it's all predicated on Hellenic and Hellenistic philosophy. Okay, now all this stuff existed in Sumer and in Babylon and in ancient Egypt for sure, but we don't get it in a preserved sort of digestible format that is cognizable to the Western mind in the same way that, say, the Platonic dialogues are, or the writings of Proclus are. We have not inherited that, or at least it hasn't penetrated from academic translation into the mainstream. So really, the water we're swimming in is Hellenistic here. So all of those philosophies constitute what we would now, post-Enlightenment, post-Industrial Revolution, what we would now consider esoteric or occult. But, you know, classical arithmetic, you know, the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, harmony, and arithmetic, geometry, harmony, and astronomy. These were not separated from an idea of an essential metaphysic. So it's only later did we kind of drain the blood out of the, you know, our quote unquote hard sciences now.
Well, like even in the past, most of these people that you see, like, I mean, I've even covered Saint Hildegard. She was a polymath. I mean, you have all these people that are actually polymath. You know, there was a lot more. They looked at everything and like applying it to like every single subject that they studied. Mm-hmm. Which hence is why I bring so many people on the show, because I'm not a polymath myself. So I got to bring everybody who has different things together, try to make sense of something. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that is another huge problem too, is just the education system and the way that we look at things. It's just not the same anymore.
Yeah, it is a huge problem. It's an existential problem for human beings in the 21st century. We're really, we can't, it's hard to talk about. So I'm not going to, but ultimately we really need a drastic reevaluation of education, but it's happening. It's happening right now, and it's happening in these spaces, right? I'm currently studying the Severan liberal arts. I'm also teaching the quadrivium, and all of this is happening online. So I'm not going to a university. I'm not taking out, you know, paying Fannie Mae. None of that's happening. I'm sitting here. I'm not going to be $20,000 in debt. I am going to interact with a small group of people, you know, compared to a lecture hall. And we're going to discuss, you know, without bias, without reductive materialist bias, and being afraid to feel foolish. You know, like, that's why I made my channel, because I saw a lot of scholars out there doing their thing, and I wanted my channel to be a place where belief was not a 4-letter word, because not a dirty word. And we come together in these spaces and we learn, you know, and we explore ideas of the I would say antique or magical worldview, maybe let's call it.
I like that, man. Well,
Yeah.
I do think it's a lot easier for people to actually find what they're looking for now, especially with the internet, like you're getting at.
Yeah, and I mean, like the places, podcasts like this, where you guys are having so many people on, it's free. You know, people just can consume this stuff and get like a real education. It's very high value.
That's what I try. That's what I'm shooting for. Thank you. I'm trying my best. That's why we got someone on like you. Does anybody here want to ask this guy any questions or say anything? Or I keep going?
I have a question. I really liked your you bringing up how the Hebrews used the Greek words to kind of build on their understanding of what they may have been looking at prior to getting these new words for kind of new mapping of the system, if you will. And to that, these different streams of systems or information coming together and enhancing. I really like that you brought together the East and West, to speak broadly, but just the different studies from the Eastern and Western traditions. And could you maybe expound on how that has helped you understand the different streams by, understanding the Qigong and the Reiki energy systems, and how you might have explored the Western ideas with the Eastern knowledge, and maybe vice versa?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of, my big project, I guess my life's work is trying to show, because it can't just be done in a single book like in etheric magic. This is kind of the introduction, but it's part of a larger conversation. And I spent a lot of years engaging in what I called, spiritual exoticism. I went to the farthest parts east and looked in Zen and looked at yoga because I didn't understand what was under my nose. But now when I come back to these systems, I see that culturally, on a cultural DNA level, a blueprint level, I understand the Western system more than I understand the vernacular, the nuances, the subtleties of something like Zen, which was my first meditative practice. I studied with the Zen Roshi, say Zen meditation, and that's great. If you put a gun to my head and said you got to choose meditation or ritual, there's no way I could part with my meditation. I just can't do it. But the understanding of these things, really, for me, it starts from the Western perspective. So what have we got? All right. I'm into magic. I love magic. Let's look at some of the quintessential magical texts in the West. Well, you got to read On the Mysteries, because he gives the whole system of what he called, Iamblichus calls synthemata, which then Agrippa, right? Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, writing like 1100 years later, he calls it the Latin sigillum. And this all means signatures. It's why you have a certain incense for a certain planet or a certain god. It's literally why you use a certain herb. It's because their essences are diffused throughout everything in the cosmos. If you read what they were talking about, the gods, the gods really are numbers, but we anthropomorphize them so that we can understand them through human-like or animal-like images. But at the end of the day, it's very, very abstract. They're the root essences of all causality that diffuse themselves and create everything in the cosmos. So a rose, for instance, the petals, the aroma, the silky texture, the color, that's going to be very Venusian or Aphrodite, if you like. But a rose typically has thorns, not Venusian, very martial. It has roots, very Saturnian. So it really has tremendous bearing on Agrippa's system of magic. That is where everything, especially Golden Dawn magic comes from. So then you start looking and you're like, all right, we've got all the theory, we've got all the philosophy, but where is the actual system? And that is not as well preserved in the West. In systems of like Chinese medicine, really most forms of traditional medicine, particularly in the East, these are kind of these right under your nose, secret agglomerations of this tradition of signatures, right? And we've kind of thrown it out in the West in favor of allopathic medicine and the pharmaceutical industry, which at first was, really, really reliant on something like Paracelsian medicine, which itself relied on a humoral medical diagnostic system, which is based in the signatures. So if you go and you study Chinese diagnosis, Chinese medical correspondence theory, you will then be able to go back and apply this stuff to magic. You'll have the system. It takes a lot of time, but it's there. And so this is just an example. It's one of the ways I kind of I didn't know this was going to be the case, but it's one of the ways I kind of accidentally found that you have to bridge these hemispheric cultures. That's the only way you can get the whole thing.
I like what you just said about, I guess, numbers. Gods. I myself, it's kind of like, I guess maybe it's a little not risky, but controversial to come out and say. I myself, I really don't believe all those things are like real. Like I do think they're a little bit different than people look at. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I've even gone into real quick, and it's just a weird question, and then I think my boy the branch over here has something he wants to ask you. Only because you kind of we're kind of getting onto it now about the gods not maybe being real in that sense, and looking at being, I guess, a polymath. Looking at some other things that like Robert Flood has done or other people, you start seeing the brain and the eyeball popping up. You ever think that any of that stuff, is there any symbolism or occultism or whatever it might actually be like pointing at that type of stuff as well?
Yeah, well, the thing is, this also can sort of reduce down to, again, Platonic philosophy. The relationship to sight and the mind in the Platonic, in the Platonic and Neoplatonic, and therefore another system that was influenced by Greek words. A lot of people nowadays, we want to sort of reinvest the Egyptian culture with its own sort of spiritual tradition that we understand. So we say, oh, the Hermetica is Egyptian, but the Hermetica is Hellenistic. It uses it uses Greek philosophical terms, does not use Egyptian philosophical terms. Logos, psyche, metempsychosis, all of these ideas come out of that tradition. But the key there is in books 6 and 7 of the Republic, when Plato's Socrates describes the allegory of the cave, right, which is the paradigm of all Western initiation, moving from darkness to light. And then he says, why the sun? Why is the sun your image of God? He says, because the sun is to sight what God is to the mind and knowledge. So there is a sun behind the sun that illuminates in here. It doesn't happen anywhere else. It illuminates in here. But the sun itself as an emissary, what we would call the body in Platonism, in theurgy, we would call the sun, Ilios. We would call that the body of the sublunary demiurge. And the purpose it serves is to give us sort of express analogically the principle of illumination, so that it gives us sight and it gives us knowledge, right? You can't know something if you can't discern its characteristics, and we can't do that in the dark. So there's that relation that automatically comes to my mind when you bring that up, because, well, we know Robert Flood would have been very familiar with these traditions, but also, that's kind of what I'm steeped in. So that's obviously that Platonic Hermetic sort of filter is what I'm going to be looking through everything at.
Yeah, I even think even in the Enneads, I think they had a thing on site. So yeah, they were even like kind of like getting about like the whole like relationship between like, I guess, sight and what's in between, even like what's in between here in the table I'm looking at. Like,
yeah, well, and the ancient study of light was called optics, because the Greeks, there were, in terms of their sort of physiological philosophy, their medical philosophy or philosophy of anatomy, they were really of two frames of mind. You saw things because light entered your eyes, or there's this other really cool thing. You saw things because light was exiting your eyes, and whatever those beams concentrated on brought knowledge. I mean, that's kind of cool idea to think about, walking around with laser beams firing out of your eyes. But so yeah, this idea of light, illumination, and sight are very, very intertwined. I mean, even in modern biological sciences, it's just, it's a little less focused on that relationship, and it's more focused on anatomy itself, I would say, nowadays.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that answer. That was great. It's probably the most I got out of anybody I've asked that.
You can
Normally,
squeeze.
normally weird some people out to where I don't think they'll come back on. Actually, there's one or two people I did that to. I was like,
No, I
sorry.
mean these are awesome prompts. You guys ask great questions and give great comments.
Thanks. The branch. I think I saw you in chat. You were looking to ask a question, and I don't want to leave you out. So you jumped in late. What's going on?
Hey guys, it's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to meet you, Ike.
Likewise.
Thanks for hosting me. Some of the things you discussed kind of jumped out at me. So I wanted to mention, first of all, Nick, with the polymath thing, it reminded me of how the Mason is instructed to learn the liberal sciences. So when Ike was talking about the classes he was taking, I was thinking, oh, well, that's, what you're supposed to do as a Mason, right? Is to shape your mind. And, but what is the purpose of that, right? So I think it might be partly so that you can relate the correspondences appropriately, and or teach perhaps. But anyhow, so you mentioned you were a carpenter, speculative Mason at the very least, and a magician. So I was curious, you might be able to kind of answer a question I've asked other people before, because you did mention the body of Christ being like the sun, right? So where they gather is the church, right? So I've always found it kind of strange. Why did the church change the way it did? From your opinion as a carpenter, maybe you have some insights on, because the temple door was supposed to face east, right? And so with this relationship to the sun and the body of Christ, I'm starting to wonder, well, are we losing things like this, the little details, in our communal ritual practices, because, well, it was more convenient just to put it on the strip mall location, so we're not going to really pay attention to the actual blueprints that were provided to us in Leviticus, for instance. So as a carpenter, maybe you can answer that question, because you know how important blueprints are. That's the mind of God, right?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I'm glad you brought up the several liberal arts of the fellow crafts degree. It's actually how I got interested in Jamie's work. He did a master work called Approaching the Middle Chamber that just totally floored me. And he goes through for the fellow craft, because a lot of times it's this midpoint in your Masonic journey, and you're just like, okay, get me through. I want the Master Mason. And like, also, where the hell are you going to learn the 7 liberal arts? But they're really important, because when you begin to understand them, and then at the same time, as I'm learning them, right, I'm practicing carpentry. I'm apprenticing under a master carpenter. And you begin to see that it's like, we have this idea of like sacred geometry nowadays, where we're sort of like reinvesting geometry with a kind of this almost like quasi sci-fi overlay, and like making it like this really, really sort of abstracted, strange thing that is I don't know, it's part of the spiritual aesthetic. And we have to do that, because the geometry was made, it started with Euclid, but after, when we discovered non-Euclidean geometry, we went completely hard science with this stuff. And what studying the liberal arts shows you, right, because they're derived ultimately from Plato's Republic, right? He gives these 7 sciences that the philosopher king must be educated in. Aristotle kind of bears them out, and then you get these official, particularly in the scholastic era that we were talking about earlier with Thomas Aquinas, and this is the way that they learn things. And what was passed down from that philosophical tradition, that metaphysical tradition, was the theology of number, right? The theology of arithmetic, the theology, the metaphysic of geometry, the metaphysic of music and harmony. And it was inherent. It was completely inherent. So if you were to study, particularly as a modern person, the 7 liberal arts, the way that they were traditionally taught, you would essentially the entire time be discussing the way that God creates the universe. This is very important to the Master Mason. And not only that, because it's constantly focused on a metaphysic. There is no point, right? So there's this really great guy's third century mathematician, Neo-Pythagorean named Theon of Smyrna. And he wrote this really, really cool short treatise, but dense, called Mathematics Useful for Understanding Plato. And the big differentiation you see in this book, in the way that he wrote, he says, okay, here's your arithmetical theorems, here's your geometrical theorems, here's your harmonic theorems, right? But before he launches into all this hard science, hard math jargon, he says, beginning at one, beginning with unity, beginning with unity. And what he's doing there is he's emphasizing the priority of God. He's emphasizing the priority of the absolute. He doesn't venture into any discussion of mathematics without first invoking God. What do we say in Masonry? You know, no man should enter into any greater or important undertaking without first invoking the blessings of deity. So always bringing that back to the table. And I think that this understanding in general of the theological and metaphysical nature, which is inherent to everything we do, losing that, we have sacrificed our understanding of any of our traditions, whether that's a lot of times occult, whether that's Christian, whatever it is. We have inherited things that we don't understand how to use, because we've basically taken the knowledge of that mechanic out of our lexicon, out of our brains. We don't think like that. We don't understand that. We don't know what they thought. Why? Because when we read what they wrote, we're constantly trying to filter it through our modern lens, you know, which that will just screw everything up. You'll never understand what they're talking about if you keep trying to stick it through what you know. So the key is then to go back, and it's a tremendous undertaking, and I will do it for you. but the key is to go back and to learn exactly what they learned. You know, learn it. Don't sit there and try and say, oh, well, you know, maybe they meant this. And what if it, shut up, learn what they learned. That's it. Okay. Then once you've assimilated that information and you've seen the way that their minds thought, the way that, and then you've affected a restitution of the ancient worldview, of the holistic worldview that we're all trying to get our hands on. We should re-enchant our worlds, right? I mean, it's right there. But you've got to shut down and shut off this part of your brain that wants to, you know, reduce everything and make it fit 1-to-1, square peg, square hole, into what you understand, because it's not going to happen. You need to be re-educated. So I don't know how that ties into, I know how it ties into carpentry, because like, I don't know why, but I can tell you definitively 90-degree angle is the strongest one that you could use, right? I don't know why, but that's a law. That's a law that exists regardless if there are ever any 90-degree angles ever anywhere. That's a law that exists independent of its material expressions. So I mean, in that way, I understand, you know, it was really cool to go through carpentry and the 7 liberal arts at the same time. But in terms of Christianity, I think that's a big part of it. You know, I really think it's a big part of it. We don't really understand any of this stuff, and we're trying to understand the esoteric with our exoteric minds.
Yes.
That's not going to happen.
Sure. That's well said. I like that. Branch, did you want to ask anything else? Was that good?
Well, yeah, maybe. And thank you so much. I appreciate that. I guess I would add to it a little bit, because he's familiar with how a lodge looks. And so I've kind of always felt like lodges look more like what a church should look like, kind of for these reasons, because they kind of preserve some of those Old Testament things. So just by going and attending lodge and watching how, you know, the officers walk and ambulate and, you know, never go between the worshipful master and the altar. You know, there's a lot of different things you can observe and kind of glean over time, and you don't get that in church today because they've kind of sanitized everything and just it's the death of detail, you know. So I was just curious if he had any particular insights, maybe like, does he ever go to church, or if he has, because you mentioned like attending Greek Orthodox, I think, before, and which I have as well in the past. And there are some insights to be gathered there, because like they still have the iconostasis, for instance, which is kind of like the holy of holies.
Yeah, those little saloon doors.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I was just kind of the opinion, like, do you think that maybe in the future we're gonna, because, you know, think about it magically, what the church / temple is constructed of was actually prescribed, you know, and so we've replaced it with, you know, discount drywall from the whatever and so on and so forth. So I think magically we've kind of insulated ourselves from having like an authentic religious type experience, or static experience maybe. And so I think that was something that some of the mysteries of the old days were trying to preserve through their practices. And the Masons kind of have, maybe, even if it's kind of become mundane, I think they were trying to do that in their own way as well. So I was just curious, do you think we'll have like a revival of maybe a return to temples and churches looking how they maybe should, or having some type of more of a focus on these structures? So I guess that would just be kind of a follow-up.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I would say from the practical perspective, there are not many people who are able to build. We don't use the same materials anymore. To your point, we used to use stone, marble, granite, etc. It's a totally different way of working with material. We use wood now and various, you know, composites, synthetics, and things like this. By the way, no matter what anybody tells you, there is no such thing as green building. It's all very harmful. I don't care what anybody tells you. There's no such thing as green building. But the understanding of things like archways and the ornamentation, right? Think of how ornate, even up until, you know, early, like the first quarter of the 20th century, you know, 1925, something like that. You know, we were surrounded in beauty. Nowadays, you know, we have a very square, you know, modular kind of minimalist aesthetic. It robs our brain of being able to see what has been referred to as, you know, architecture is frozen music. Music is liquid architecture. So it's, we don't really have that anymore. You know, we don't have the beauty. And so I don't know, right? Because even in ancient Egypt, the intricacy and the proportionality, we don't think like that anymore. We can't, you know. And so I don't know that it'll return to that. But my question is how important really is it if something else happens, which is what we're seeing? We're seeing a resurgence in spiritual outreach. We're seeing for the first time in a long time, we're seeing pagan temples being built in Greece. You know, the Greek government was given it a little bit of a hard time, I think. I don't really know the particulars of the whole story, but you know, there's this resurgence. They're building these, you know, these Grecian style temples and putting on ceremonial in there. And on the other hand, you've got something like the edifice of Christianity, which is dwindling. It's a good thing. And Ratzinger said this: the church will have to. It's become such a monstrosity. It's become such a caricature, a dark twin, that it has no choice but to go through the alchemical fire, which will reduce it down to its most essential components. That means we might go back to house churches. That's the kind I serve in, right? I have an ordination, a clerical ordination in a pre-Nicene church, meaning a church that practices to the best of our ability Christianity the way it was before the Council of Nicaea. Okay, so and it's small groups of people meeting and having the sacramental, theurgic, alchemical Eucharist, because that's the Eucharist is all those things. It's theurgic and it's alchemical. Okay, so this is what has to happen before we start understanding, how to. And the same thing's happened in Masonry. I am so lucky that my lodge gets to meet at 80 Broadway, the Masonic Temple in Asheville. It's gorgeous. But I've been all over this country in the last 3 years to talk to Brother Masons, and they have had to divest themselves of the financial burden of their beautiful, beautiful building. They're meeting in the basements of VFW halls. So that's happening too. The Masonic numbers are dwindling. The Christian numbers are dwindling. But it's getting back to a core that I think is really important. Sincere, earnest people that are there really looking for the heart of what it is. I think that's probably the most important. No matter what your spiritual path is, get back down to the elements, get back down to the foundations. And that should be the fire that we crowd around to warm ourselves in this, spiritually arid and cold terrain of the 21st century.
And may I please follow up once more? Since his vocation was a trade skill, I think part of what we're seeing is because there are fewer people going into trades, we're also losing the ability to create these things over time, right? So it kind of reminds me of like the fourth turning kind of principle, is like maybe we'll have a renaissance of some sort occur. But I was going to ask, the question itself, however, was how important you think labor is for somebody having a sense of purpose from a Kabbalistic perspective. Matt has made the comment before, like, you can find Kabbalah in everything, whether it be tennis, carpentry, whatever, as long as you're into it deep, you're going to reveal things. And so I was just curious, if we move into this future of like a universal basic income and things like that, do you think we're going to see a further degradation of spirituality, or we'll kind of be forced into these small house churches, right? And it kind of reminds me of the days when they met underground, and I can't remember what those were called, the Mithraims or whatever.
Yeah. And you see that in Egypt too. They use, particularly the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut has early Christian crosses on it, because that's where they would have to go out to the Valley of the Kings, away from civilization, under cover of darkness in these ruins, in order to practice mass. So yeah, it's really cool. These little hideaways and these secret places, and the markers they left that are still there, after like 1,500 years. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I do think that, well, you asked how important is labor? Well, I'll say this from a Kabbalistic perspective, we are in Malkut of Asiya, or Asiya. Okay. Asiya, the fourth or fifth lowest world, its literal translation is the world of making. This is what is meant in the biblical Genesis, when by the sweat of your brow will you eat bread. Now is the time of toil. That's you must labor. You must labor here. And I'm not saying everybody has to go out and become a construction worker, but you have to embrace a life of physicality, because it's labor, just especially nowadays, to not be very unhealthy physically. That's a kind of labor, to keep your body functioning optimally in 2025 in America. So, especially now, a lot of us work online, sitting for hours. That's completely new to me. I've only ever worked as a hump. I've done manual labor my whole life, and now all of a sudden I'm sitting here 8 hours a day writing, and I'm like, I need to get out of this chair. These things are important. It sounds crazy, but I mean, especially Kabbalistically, and you want to, use that, Jewish or Judeo-Christian mythology from Genesis, and the expulsion from the garden was really saying, look, you have chosen to enter into a world that requires toil. It's not punishment, but it's you have chosen to enter into a place that requires toil. So yeah, I think labor is important. I think trades are important. What a lot of people don't understand, they think of carpentry is kind of like, I think carpentry gets conflated with general labor. You know, people that are like sweeping floors and carrying wheelbarrows. That's what you got to do when you start out. It's part of the apprenticeship. You do the grunt work. But carpentry is so incredibly intellectual. You are working with precision mathematics, and then somehow you've got to get this out of the material. You've got to make no 2x4 straight, you know, but you've got to figure this out. You know, you fighting with the materials and getting them into mathematical geometric shapes that don't make you lose a lot of money, because when you screw up in carpentry, you lost money. And B, that the house or building doesn't fall in on everybody. And then you got a real problem on your hands. Okay, so it's not even just the labor, but it's like I think our modern civilization, especially the younger people, can really benefit from, you know, extracting the real-time value of this mind-body axis and the interplay, the intellect, and then taking what you've learned, taking that skill and applying it in real life. It will just help you be I think, a more effective person.
That was great. Does anybody wanted to ask anything, or to wrap it up?
I have a question. Ike, you're a treasure trove of wonderful wisdom, may I say. And I wanted to put or give you some prompts of the things that you've been touching on, and maybe if you could put them together, partly because of my obsession with the topics. You mentioned the Tetractys. I wonder if, and sacred geometry, I wonder if you might be able to share with us how the Tetragrammaton is related to the Tetractys, and at least in depiction of it, and so forth. I just wonder if you could build on the Tetractys and the relationship to the Word of God, another thing you brought up.
Oh yeah, the Word of God, very, very good. Right. So that's the ineffable name of God, is the Tetragrammaton. It's also Greek, that word. Tetra, for, grammaton, you know, letters. So you've got the Tetractys. I'm going to try and do my best here for somebody that maybe has never heard or seen it before. The Tetractys is an example of what I called before a triangular number. Okay. Why? Because when you it's basically anytime you add in numerical sequence. If you add 2 to 1, you get a triangular number, right? Because it's 1, 2. You add 3 to 2 to that sequence, you get a triangular number. You add 4, you get a triangular number. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 arranged in a triangle, those little counting pebbles, gives us Tetractys, it gives us 10. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. Those add to 10. The Pythagoreans who devised the system said when you have 10, you have everything. That is right, because 10 is 1 on a higher arc. And I'm giving a course right now called Musica Universalis, Music as Magic. And we're it's a huge part of it is exactly what I'm talking about. Now, this geometric and arithmetical overlay that allows us to use harmony and sympathy in magic. But so we can get into some hairy territory. I'm going to forego that because I don't want to beat anybody over the head with this stuff. But the 10, therefore, was the Tetractys was therefore their conception of the sum totality of the essential universal forces. Same thing with the Sphirot on the Tree of Life. 10, right? And that's the whole cosmos, and it just refracts or fractalizes. Now, this figure, and here's something for the Masons, was reduced in Plato's Timaeus to a series of numbers, integers. and they called this Plato's lambda. And along the right side, right? So it's essentially you would have the tetractys as a full triangle, but the lambda is just extracting the apex and two sides of that triangle and not the base. So it looks like a Masonic compass. It looks like compasses. Okay. And at the top, Plato gives us a series of really random, they seem random numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 27. And what he's doing there is there are two branches that start, right? Theonis Smyrna says, beginning with unity, beginning with 1 at the top. You move down the right and you have the odd numbers, right? 3, 9, 27 powers. You move down the left side, you get the even numbers, 2, 4, 8. So when you arrange the tetragrammaton on this, you essentially have the yod, right? Because we read Hebrew right to left. You have the yod moving down the side of the odd numbers, which are thought to be masculine or positive. Now, yod is, if you want to talk about it in a Hermetic Kabbalistic context, it represents the root of the powers of fire. And then it builds out from that yod he vav he. And this is the sequence of generation. And it all goes back to this really interesting thing. We call it the tetragrammaton, right? Yes, thank you for putting this up. We call it the tetragrammaton. 4-lettered name. There are only 3 letters in that name. One of them repeats. There are only 3 letters. And what did we say happens in the beginning? The 1 is somehow 3. That hey final. This is the window through which the eye peers out and perceives universe. It is a new, you could even picture Yod He Vav He kind of like walking through this window, this sort of thing. It's the inevitable sort of forth that gives birth to the new fractal permutation. And this is exactly what the tetractys and this cycle of generation here, this arrangement of the words, this is what it's trying to show you. But the thing is, you really need to understand what this meant to the Pythagoreans and Neo-Pythagoreans and the Platonists before you can understand everything else. And then so you'd get 1, 3, 9, 27, 1, 2, 4, and 8, right? Which is just, it's a sequence of adding numbers to other numbers. Adding 1 to 1, you get 2. Adding 1 to 2, you get 3. Then you go 2 to the power of itself, 3 to the power of 2, 3 to the power of itself, 2 to the power of 3. Squaring and cubing. And it essentially, as the lambda, it shows how God moves from a point to a line to a surface, right? That's why we call it a square number, creates a square, right? And when you've got that little 3 above it, that exponent 3, that is cubing. So we've gone from point to line to surface to solid object. Effectively, the lambda and its expression as the tetractys and the 4 elements of the name are showing how the divine literally manifests, penetrates into 3-dimensional space and becomes something. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I've been drowning in this stuff until I've learned how to swim in it. So
that was great. Thank you for sharing that. That brought it all together. The word, the tetragrammaton, the tetractys, and sacred geometry. Thank you.
Yeah, because the word is logos, right? Order. And that's exactly what the tetractys is trying to show. Order. It's how God orders the cosmos so that he can come into existence.
It also reminds me of, maybe you might be familiar with this, Ike. I've heard there's the Masonic equation or idea where they say that the 4 is equal to 10.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. That's why it's called the tetractys, right? Tetra is 4 in Greek. but there's 10 dots, but there's 4 lines. It's because, again, 4 is the completion of everything. And because 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. And if you have 10, you have everything.
Dope.
May I ask a question real quick?
Go for it, Branch, please.
Could this tetraxis also be a tool to look at when looking at the minor pip cards, because they're all in 10s of each suit's a 10, right? So is there anything there to glean?
Yeah, I would absolutely arrange them, because, again, we've got the tetractys is effectively representing the tree of life in a triangular form. It's a precursor to the Kabbalistic tree of life. Okay. Without the paths, but the thing is, it's also drawn with paths, but they're angles. But we won't get into that. So what you do in the Hermetic Kabbalah is you take the pip cards and you put them by number into the Sphirot. It would be the same thing. Right? All the aces go to Kether, all the 2s go to Hokmah, all the 3s go to Binah, all the 4s go to Chesed, and so on and so forth, Gebur, Tiferet, all the way down to 10 in Malkut. Okay? So you could absolutely do that with the Tetractys. And the Tetractys is essentially the biggest thing that I want to impress on people is that it's if you needed just a keywords for it, it's the formula of generation. It's how everything is created.
Yeah, one thing I can add, maybe, Joshua, is if you look into the Tarot of Bohemians from Pappus, he goes into like connecting the tarot with the Yud He Vav He, like the Tetragrammaton. And then if you know already that it's basically the same as the Tetractys, then you can just make the associations yourself. I'd also want to ask something to Ike. I don't know if you ever went about the works of the Archaeometer from St. Eve's. I have the book here. It's he basically worked with Pappus as well, who founded like Martinism and so on and so on. And I found it very intriguing, very nice how it connects to what we were talking here, because the Archaeometer goes about, like, it was basically St. Eve's idea of connecting all the like past mythologies, all the past sciences, and connecting everything and so on. Which, like I mentioned, it was already in the 1800s, but they knew the Kabbalah. So like he'll talk about Kabbalah, but probably not the Kabbalah that we know, because the Kabbalah, as we think, like Tree of Life with colors and whatever, the Hermetic one just came after it, right? So, but he gives a lot of nice examples, like we were talking about, how you can construct things with angles, and then how maybe that angle will be connected to the same essence of a color or of a sound or something. Like that's what the thing shows here, like the connections with, let's say, maybe one of the numbers is with one of the colors, and one sound and one astrology sign and whatever. So, but the only problem, I mean, now we kind of have, yeah, that's great. Now we kind of have an English translation. I found, or Solar found, one of our lodge friends. It's not really the best, but I don't know if you ever encountered it before, which I think you should give it at least a skim through. Would be an interesting thing.
Yeah. I haven't looked at that. I'm definitely aware of Saint Yves or Saint Yves. I'm gonna emphasize your point there that the sort of Martinist and especially the French way of utilizing the Kabbalah is to this day very different. You'll meet people that come out of a French system and never worked anything Golden Dawn derivative, and they have very different attributions to the tarot cards. But yeah, I absolutely, I will check that out. I got to put it on the queue. Thank you very much.
Nice. I think I'll send you on Instagram.
Yeah.
The name.
Thank you. But does anybody have any questions about the Golden Dawn?
Oh yeah, you know what? I was gonna probably leave. I was probably just gonna leave that out because it's already been an hour and a half in.
Okay,
so.
all right, yeah.
No, you're good on that, dude.
Yeah, right.
No, maybe we'll have you back on some other time to talk about that. But yeah, we'll just. Yeah. I think this conversation was better not actually getting into that topic. So
good, awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
No, this was great. Yeah, was there anything else, Jin, or anybody else here have anything you wanted to ask before we wrap it up?
Well, I do have one, of course. So Ike, you touched on something really interesting that we've kind of played with as a speculative idea in the Gray Lodge. Like there's 5 of us, but there's 3 of us represented on the panel right now. But of the sort of aeonic shift in religion, and so this is obviously a follow-up to Matt's question, like sort of the decentralization, deinstitutionalization into these smaller networks, into these smaller nodes, you could even say. And I want your opinion on how that will also perhaps look in contemporary American magic, or maybe even speculative in the near future of American magic, because you have a lot of people who, many of whom, or all of whom, perhaps you've spoken with, talking kind of about, like, not necessarily like they're abandoning their system or their lodge or their traditional sort of frameworks, but they are kind of going away from the dogmatic, as you said, the klipas of the institutions. They are kind of crumbling, they are destabilized, and they are not carrying forward into the future, perhaps even the original or even the preserved meanings. So I just want your appraisal of, like, where do you think modern American magic is going to go? Do you see it being contained in a particular religious or traditional framework, or do you see something like new arising, perhaps?
Well, what usually takes place is some form of synthesis between the push-pull of diametric opposition. So where we find that in our communities, particularly regarding magic and occultism, that's going to define the boundaries, the limit of the system, this opposition, and then somewhere in the middle they're going to meet, and there'll be many manifestations of that. Magic, in particular, it goes through these growth spurts, and for better or for worse, if you look at it historically, at least since the 1800s, it usually happens right before a major world event that is not necessarily fun. But magic will kind of come to the surface because it's important, right? It's a way of healing the collective. It's an opportunity to heal the collective. It's not a way to heal the collective, because I feel like it's like anything else. It's up to the individual. How are you going to use this? And that will determine whether or not it heals or hinders. But I would say there is a deinstitutionalization, but I see also in magic a thirst and a hunger for structure. And so a lot of people want to, kind of, I don't know. It seems like they almost want to be like, they want to engage in a form of like esoteric tourism, come into the Golden Dawn for a little while, see what that's all about. Structure sounds really nice. That might help. But then the thing is, you get there and you're looking for this like confirmation bias. Instead of saying, oh, maybe this will change me, you're saying, oh, maybe, I don't know, make me more intellectually fat or something like that. Just give me more information. Again, you can't think your way into this stuff. But there are a lot of people that are craving that structure. Whether or not they can handle it is a different story. We have, as modern people, look at us now. We're a bunch of talking heads. On one hand, it's great that the internet can bring us together, and on the other hand, there's a generation of people coming into this world that are completely abstracted from traditional community and social dynamics. Okay, so people have a really hard time dealing with the fact that there are other people here. Like in my physical space. So we need to work on that, because magic will collapse if it becomes a bunch of solo practitioners that are just communicating via Zoom. Because the same thing, the same eclecticism that ultimately never it goes to the nth degree. It goes to its furthest possible extreme and then completely dissipates. Rather than sort of crowding around, and I'm talking, on a demographic level, not necessarily I'm not speaking about individuals. I know for certain that's going to happen, but I was saying on a demographic level, populations level, I see magic kind of turning into something completely different. And a lot of this has to do with, academia's sudden interest in what we do, which is not a bad thing, right? I have a lot of friends that are academics. I organized an academic conference in Egypt, but I would say that somehow is going to impact that, and the sort of socially distant interactions is going to impact that. I do see people yearning for that group dynamic, but I do also find that when they get there, a lot of them, especially if they're younger, can't handle it. They can't, like you come into the Golden Dawn, and it's not a democracy. It's a hierarchy. Okay. There are 3 chiefs in every temple, and you have to do what they say. We can't tell you what diet to go on or who to hang out with, but it's still in that dynamic. There is a clear hierarchy. People don't like hierarchy anymore because they're insecure to the point where that makes them feel intimidated or uncomfortable. Whereas in previous relationships or previous iterations of communal interaction, it was nice to find a little spot where you fit in. This is where my job is, and I'll work my way up. People don't want to do that anymore, to a large degree. So that's the trouble that we're going to have. They want it, but when the rubber hits the road, it's uncomfortable. And so they decide, I'm going to go and do something else. And then normally don't get me wrong, some people, unfortunately, suffer abuse at the hands of others. But I would say certainly while that is an issue, it can happen anywhere. And I think that it's not necessarily the rule. I think it's the exception. But you hear from a lot of those people who get burned. They go on campaigns where they're making sure everybody knows what happened. And so I try to be a voice. Look, the Golden Dawn is not perfect. Why? Because it's made of people. And everything people do, everything people make, if it's a religion, if it's a company, it's going to be indelibly imprinted with our highest potentialities and our lowest. Okay. There's no escaping that. Welcome to duality. So welcome to the realm. So we'll see. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure I have an answer.
I think that's the perfect sort of way to respond to that, is to just say, yeah, it's in flux. Let's see what happens. Yeah. And let's surf with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys think that maybe that's what motivated some of the names that were mentioned throughout Iambiculus or whatever, people like that? There's stories about how some of these folks would travel to other lands. And so in that new system that they're now in, they were a big fish way back in Athens or whatever, but they go to Egypt and now it's like, well, now I'm a novice again, right? So do you think that that's kind of part of the hermit journey, perhaps, is to seek out contemporaries or people that you can have fellowship with or something like that? Is there an element of that there, perhaps?
Yeah. And I mean, don't underestimate the support system it can give you. When I was a kid, I used to see people in my hallway, probably in like 3rd grade, this stuff started really happening, and I didn't like it. I hated it. So I blocked it out. And then years later, when I undergo Golden Dawn initiation, lo and behold, the doors are blown off and all this stuff starts happening again. So, I'm waking up in the middle of the night and there are people in my room, figures, entities, whatever, with a visible appearance. I can then go to like a support group of between 3 to 10 to 20 people that all have different experiences, different backgrounds, and all have a rather firm footing in this stuff. And I can use them as a sounding board. Hey, should I go to a mental hospital? Like what needs to be, am I losing my mind? And then you'll have people kind of because the average person might freak out to stuff like that, and my first inclination was like, I'm going crazy. But it was ultimately through the support given to me by people in my first Golden Dawn temple, the old temple, right? Like a village. Really, really talked me through that stuff. And now it's to the point where, I can control it instead of it really being a consistently jarring experience for me. So I think support structures are another way of apprenticing yourself to a path. Because ultimately, like, it's not just about submission. It's, to your point, it's very much about remaining an eternal student. But you should have, I personally think you should have many teachers.
Some would say at least 108.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have that much time or money.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it depends who you count as a teacher, right? If you go outside and you look at a tree and okay, you learn something. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
you can rank up that number.
Yeah, and in this world, right, there are so many teachers from beyond the grave. You know, big one for me was Dion Fortune, and you know, I visited her grave in Glastonbury probably about 6 years ago, and you know, I kind of did it like, oh, cool. I've been reading her books for years. I learned a lot about it, and then I get there, and I just got so incredibly overwhelmed emotionally. I was just bawling. I didn't even know why. It was like despite myself, you know, and yeah, I realized probably afterward that like this person is a teacher to me. I never met him, you know, never met her.
Well, I can understand that.
Yeah.
I guess everybody, Jen or Matt or Ethan, you guys good? A branch too? So we'll wrap it up then. Yeah,
Well,
sorry.
thank you for having me on, guys. This was
Hell
great.
yeah. Hell yeah. No, that was awesome. Sorry we never did get to the Golden Dawn, but like I said, I'm quite happy with the way the show went anyway. I thought that was
That's
just
fine. I mean, look, I say this a lot. I've been called many things in my life, but never brief. So
oh, that's great. Oh, it's awesome stuff. Jen, real quick, do you want to remind everybody where they could find your stuff?
Sure. So I want to say thank you so much, Ike. This was honestly like one of the reasons I started podcasting was to have this conversation. And I've had many milestones, like Nick and I have done lots of cool things. So thank you, Nick. And also bringing, obviously it's opened the door to bring people onto my show. So including Matt and Joshua, and also the group show we do, the Grey Lodge, speculative Kabbalah, speculative Kalachakra, and speculative Gnosticism every Friday night live on X. So thank you guys so much. Obviously, Joshua had the branch. I will apologize because he was late because of me. So it was nothing to do with him or his punctuation. It was because I was late. So I apologize for that. But Joshua just had an episode drop on my show on Claymore. So the Kabbalah of Claymore, we go through the anime series and the manga series. So that's called Faint Smile. I have an episode with Solar, our other co-host in the Grey Lodge, dropping either today or tomorrow morning with Gregory Peters, who wrote the new Aeon Tantra. And I have lots coming up with lots of interesting authors. And so thank you so much. And of course, thank you, Matt, for being our webmaster and building out our site and all the hard work you do for the Grey Lodge and keeping our YouTube channel, like and subscribe. And if you want to follow me at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn on Twitter, and then the show at Threshold Saints and anywhere you get your podcasts. So thank you guys all, the whole panel, and especially Ike, of course. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jen. Glad you made it today, sir. And Matt Moore, what is going on, man? Let everybody know where they can find your site and everything.
For sure. Yeah, thanks a lot, Ike. It was a very intriguing conversation. I correspond with a lot of stuff the way you think and so on. So very good. Always nice to have these type of things. And yeah, everyone can find me at Metmore19. That's going to be on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, maybe some other place. There's also my website. That's Kabbalah.com, KAABALAH.com. A lot of cool stuff going on there. Just made some updates this week. If also just opening myself more to readings, because now it's much faster to do it. And so if you are interested in that, just DM me in any of those. Thanks a lot, Nick.
Of course. Thank you very much. And Ethan Indigo, sir.
Peace. That was awesome, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and wisdom. I really appreciated that. And everyone, I appreciate you guys so much. Easy to find on all the social media. And I appreciate people reaching out and communicating, and articles dropping soon and writing frequently. So yeah, again, thanks so much, Ike.
Thank you, Ethan. I appreciate you making it again. It was early for you. And the branch. What is up, sir?
Thank you for hosting, Nick. It's a great pleasure to meet you again, Ike. Jen did a great outro for me. So all I could add to that is I did recently do a blurb on symbolic studies, soon to premiere video on Sagittarius symbolism. So check him out on Twitter and YouTube. He does some really good work. That's a wonderful gathering of people. I really appreciate being a part of this. Thank you so much for the invitation.
No, of course. Thank you for making it. And finally, Ike, if you want to, let everybody know where they can find all your stuff again.
Yeah. Thanks so much, guys, for having me on. Truly, thank you for the work that you continue to do and to give to our communities. It's invaluable. Thanks everybody that tuned in for the live stream. You can, if you want to know anything more about me, go to ikebaker.com, ikebaker.com. Again, use the chat widget in the bottom right corner. I've got a mailing list you can sign up for there. We actually just went through the theology of numbers. It's totally free. The emails are digestible. They go out every Thursday. I've got courses going on every quarter. The next one coming up is Techniques of Greco-Egyptian Theurgy. It's going to be a distillation of the work that I did in Egypt with that group of practitioners. So I'll be teaching that via Zoom. And you can reach out to me and sign up for that. And yeah, check out my podcast. I've got some solid guests. You want to learn more about the Golden Dawn? I've got 2 episodes up there about the history of the Golden Dawn, and I did an interview with my greatly honored chiefs, Chick and Tabitha Cicero, up there, and you can hear about, like, you know, them with Israel Regardy and Grady McMurtry and things like that. So go check that out. Write to me, whatever you like, and I think that's it. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, go check out that episode myself. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, man. Ike, again, thank you so much for coming on. It just really, I mean, again, sorry we didn't get into the Golden Dawn. I'm glad I asked about your books at first, but honestly, the show went better than I could have asked. So I really am very proud to put the show out for my listeners. Hopefully we'll get you back on again in the future, but again, it was an awesome conversation. And I thank you, everybody who came and made it. Again, it was a little earlier, different time zones for everybody here, but we made it happen. And I still think it's fucking wild how we both moved from New York to North Carolina.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know what we should do? We should go to Pilot Mountain.
Yeah. Was it? Yeah, I told you, right? I think I hit you up. I was like, "Oh, have you been there?" Because I want to go there and record that shit and film it. Just check it out. So
it's like 2 hours from me. I'll go.
Yeah, we definitely have. All right, so we'll definitely talk about that in the future, my man, for sure. Sure. But yeah, and thank you everybody in the chat. I think there was some new faces in there. I don't know if it was from you, maybe advertising it on your end, or some listeners, but there were some people in there I don't think I've seen before. So I appreciate you jumping on, whoever it is.
Awesome.
Yeah. And again, that's why we go live. I do appreciate the comments, regardless if they're good or bad or different opinions. I do appreciate at least people jumping in and trying to give their idea on the topic. Yeah, and that's the end of another one. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.